Hey, this is a quick tutorial on how to replace a stick box in a Gamecube controller. We're using a Type 3 stick box that we're going to replace. You can tell with this little dot here that pretty much guarantees that the controller has a Type 3. Pretty much everything in this video will apply to Type 2 stick boxes as well, but you need to source your donor stick box from a Type 2 source. You can usually bet on the old Nunchucks having a Type 2 if you get it with the really old packaging. You can just do a search on eBay for new in box and look for the old box art. But this is Type 3, so we're going to be using the Wii U Nunchuck, which guarantees a Type 3 stick box in it. You're going to need soldering iron. I'm also going to show how to install a capacitor, Snapback Capacitor. Every controller is different. You might want to do some research into figuring out the best way to figure out the capacitance for your controller, but I'm just going to stick with this for now. Go ahead and start by using your tri-wing to open up the controller. If you are replacing a Type 2 stick box or a Type 1 stick box, the Type 2 stick box donor, which is usually going to be your original generation Nunchuck, is compatible with both Type 1 and Type 2 stick boxes as a replacement. So if you have one of the older controllers with those, it doesn't matter if it has a Type 1 or Type 2 stick box, you can just replace it like so. Alright, so here we have our controller. You're going to need to get to the back of it so we can go ahead and start the desoldering process. I don't know if you're trying to salvage these buttons for anything, but I'm not. So the rest of the Nunchuck does not matter to me at all. I just need the stick box. There we go. So do note that if you do want to replace your controller control stick with the one from the Nunchuck, let's say yours is beat up and you just want a new one, it is a bit higher than the Gamecube control stick. So you'll have to move the control stick a little bit further. You might be able to do something. You'd have to be creative though. But some people just play with it fine. You can mess with it, see if it works out for you. Like I said, I literally don't care about anything here except for the stick box. So you can see on the back, here's the two screws mounting it to the motherboard, and here's the potentiometers that are also keeping it hooked onto the motherboard. Although these potentiometers actually do come off, but we're going to be replacing them along with the stick box itself. These are actually modular, you can pop them off, but we're going to be replacing it as a whole. So these are regular screws. You're just going to want to use a miniature screwdriver to get these Phillips head. But now I have to desolder the potentiometers. Use your desoldering tool of choice. I use this vacuum desoldering tool that after you loosen up the solder, you just put it up close to it, and you press this button here after you push it down, and it sucks up. There we go. Now with that, this should just pop right on. Very nice. One brand new stick box ready to solder. So here we're pretty much going to do the same thing. We got our, oh, nasty. Oh, that's gross. We got our old stick box here. We're going to just pretty much do the exact same process. Going to look at the back of the motherboard here. We'll pop off this back plate here. You see the exact same mount to the motherboard as we did on the Nunchuck. Here's the old stick box. Oh my god, I can feel the grease. That is gross. And you might want to put a little alcohol swab on the area where it used to be. Get a little rubbed out with some isopropyl on the surrounding area, and I just put the new stick box back in. Simply just line it up and you screw these in. Now we're going to solder the leads. Get your soldering iron to touch the surrounding solder to loosen it up, and then you'll just touch your solder to it, and you do that for every single one. For this next part, we're going to solder on the Snapback Capacitor. Again, this is not necessary, but it helps a lot. There's guides to figuring out a good capacitance if you don't want to just go with like a general option like 0.47, which this should cover most cases, honestly. What I do is I usually snip it right below this gap here, so they're perfectly in line with the area we have to solder it. And you'll just want to touch the solder so it liquefies and solidifies as you're putting it in place. Like so. And with that, our soldering iron is done. You can turn it off. Now we just need to make an adjustment to the back plate. And so as this sits on here, we're actually going to need the capacitor to come out from underneath this back plate. If you just take some wire cutters or a Dremel if you want to do it a little bit nicer, you can just cut out this area of plastic from underneath it, like so. Doesn't have to be pretty, but that's all you need to do. That's all you need to get the capacitor to go under here. We'll line up our shoulder buttons, make sure that the PCB side is facing up. There'll be these little areas near the top where you can see them snap into the board. Next, take the rumble, go ahead and stick it back into its cradle, and you can put the wire back underneath this little organizer. You want to even up the analog sliders for the shoulder buttons so that whenever you put the back plate back on, they line up with these holes. Go ahead and take your control stick, or your the one from the original one, stick it back on. You can see how it's supposed to go on based off its rotation. There's a little notch here, and it's on. And now you'll see the capacitor is not really lining up. What you can do is you can just move it off to the side slightly. Just make sure that the metal's not touching each other. You can see it's definitely not touching each other right there. You want to make sure that the controller cable is tucked under here and that the loop goes around this little peg here. To put the back plate back on, do like so. Just make sure it fits nice and snug. I want to give it a little bit of wiggle as you're putting it in. Make sure everything is able to adjust into place. Just screw in the rest of the tri-wing screws, and you're ready to test it out. And there you have it, brand new stick box ready to go. Snapback capacitor. If you're playing Melee or whatever, any game, if you plug it in, your controller's drifting, you just hold X, Y, and start. Hold that for about 3 seconds, your controller will reset, and then everything will be set and ready to go. It's just a property of using the capacitor. If you're playing on Dolphin, you have to, and your controller is drifting, just restart Dolphin. XY start doesn't work on Dolphin, or maybe it does. I think the newest one does, but if you're like playing a faster Melee or Slippy, I don't know if those changes are in it, so you have to just restart Dolphin if your controller's drifting. Hope your attempt at this goes well. Thank you for watching.